For 10 years the rancher slept alone, until his wife's sister claimed his bed. For 10 long years, Caleb Walker woke up before the sun every morning, not because he loved early mornings, but because sleep no longer felt like a place of rest. It felt like a place where memories waited for him in the dark. He would lie still in his bed, staring at the wooden ceiling of his old ranch house, listening to the soft sounds of the wind brushing against the walls and the distant calls of animals outside. The other side of the bed stayed untouched, cold and empty, just as it had been for a decade. The ranch sat far from the nearest town, surrounded by wide-open land that seemed to stretch forever. Rolling fields, wooden fences, and dusty paths made up most of Caleb's world. He had built this life with his wife Evelyn when they were young and full of dreams. Back then, the ranch was not just a place to work. It was a place of laughter, shared meals, and long talks under the stars. But something had changed, something neither of them had been able to fix. Their days now followed a quiet pattern. Caleb worked outside from morning until evening, tending to the animals, fixing fences, and making sure everything ran smoothly. Evelyn stayed mostly inside, keeping the house clean and cooking meals, but rarely stepping out into the sun. They spoke when needed, about simple things like what was for dinner or what needed to be repaired, but their conversations never went deeper. It was like two people living side by side, connected by the past, but separated by something neither could name out loud. But Caleb often thought about how things used to be. He remembered Evelyn's laughter, how it used to fill the house and spill out into the yard when they worked together. He remembered how she would bring him water on hot days and tease him for working too hard. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, someone who lived a different life in a different time. The ranch, in many ways, reflected Caleb's heart. Strong on the outside, steady and dependable, but quiet and lonely on the inside. The nights were the hardest. After dinner, Caleb would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sky turn from orange to deep blue. The stars would slowly appear, one by one shining brightly in the open sky. He used to share these moments with Evelyn, talking about their hopes and plans. Now, he sat alone, listening to the sounds of crickets and the soft movements of animals in the distance. Evelyn would usually go to bed early, leaving Caleb to his thoughts. He never followed right away. He wasn't in a hurry to return to a room that reminded him of everything that had been lost between them. When he finally did go inside, he would quietly close the door and lie down on his side of the bed, careful not to disturb the stillness. One afternoon, as Caleb was fixing a loose fence near the edge of the property, he noticed a cloud of dust rising along the long dirt road that led to the ranch. Visitors were rare, and deliveries were usually expected, so the sight caught his attention. He stood up, wiped his hands on his jeans, and squinted into the distance. A small car slowly made its way closer, its tires struggling with the uneven path. When it finally stopped near the house, Caleb walked over unsure of who he would find. The car door opened, and a young woman stepped out, stretching her arms as if she had been sitting for a long time. It took Caleb a moment to recognize her. "Mara?" he said, surprised. Mara was Evelyn's younger sister. He hadn't seen her in years, not since a short visit long ago. She looked different now, older, but still carried the same bright energy in her eyes. She smiled when she saw him. "Hi, Caleb," she said. "I hope this is okay." I didn't really have anywhere else to go. Caleb felt a mix of confusion and concern. "Of course it's okay." "What happened?" Mara explained that she had lost her job in the city and needed some time to figure out what to do next. She remembered the ranch as a quiet place and hoped she could stay for a while, maybe help out if needed. Before Caleb could say much more, Evelyn stepped out onto the porch. When she saw her sister, Her face showed a brief flash of surprise, followed by a small, careful smile. They hugged, but the moment felt different from what Caleb remembered of their relationship. It was warm, but guarded, as if both were unsure of what to say. Mara moved into the guest room that evening. The house, which had felt empty and still for so long, suddenly had a new sound to it. The soft steps of someone walking through the hallway, the gentle closing of doors. Even the sound of laughter, light and unexpected, floated through the kitchen as Mara talked about her journey and the city life she had left behind. Caleb found himself listening from the other room, surprised by how much the sound of her voice changed the feeling of the house. It wasn't loud or overwhelming. It was just alive. The next morning, Mara offered to help with the ranch. She followed Caleb outside, asking questions about the animals, the land, and how everything worked. She wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty, and Caleb admired her effort, even when she struggled with tasks that had become second nature to him. As the days passed, a new routine began to form. Mara worked alongside Caleb, and their conversations grew easier. They talked about simple things at first, like the weather, the animals, and life in the city. But slowly, they began to talk about deeper things too, dreams, regrets, and the feeling of being lost when life didn't go the way you expected. Caleb noticed how different Mara was from Evelyn. Where Evelyn had grown quiet and withdrawn, Mara was open and curious. She listened carefully when Caleb spoke, asking questions and showing genuine interest in his stories. It felt strange to be heard like that again. Evelyn watched from a distance. She still went about her daily tasks, but something in her seemed to shift. She noticed how much time Caleb and Mara spent together, working in the fields or talking on the porch in the evenings. She didn't say anything, but the quiet in the house took on a new kind of weight. One evening after dinner, Mara joined Caleb on the porch. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and gold as the sun set behind the hills. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the world slow down around them. "This place is beautiful," Mara finally said. "I forgot how peaceful it can be out here." Caleb nodded. "It is. Sometimes too peaceful." Mara looked at him, sensing something deeper in his words. "Do you ever feel lonely here?" The question caught him off guard. He hesitated, then answered honestly, "Despair. More than I like to admit." Mara didn't push or pry. She just sat there with him, sharing the quiet. That simple act, being there without trying to fix anything, meant more to Caleb than he realized. Inside the house, Evelyn watched the two of them through the window. She saw the way they sat side by side, not touching, not doing anything wrong, but clearly connected by something she felt she had lost long ago. A mix of emotions stirred inside her, ones she didn't know how to name or face. As the night grew darker, Mara eventually went inside, thanking Caleb for the day and saying goodnight. He stayed on the porch a little longer, thinking about how much had changed in such a short time. For the first time in years, the ranch didn't feel like a place frozen in the past. It felt like something new was beginning, even if he didn't yet understand what that meant. Caleb finally stood up and went inside, but he walked down the quiet hallway, past Mara's room, where a soft light glowed under the door, and into his own room. As he lay down, he realized something had shifted inside him. The loneliness was still there, but it didn't feel as heavy as it used to. Outside, the wind moved gently through the fields, carrying the sounds of the ranch into the night. And for the first time in a long while, Caleb closed his eyes with a sense that tomorrow might be different from yesterday. The next few days passed in a way that felt both slow and fast at the same time. Life on the ranch kept its usual rhythm, but something in the air had changed. The morning still began with the sound of birds and the soft light of sunrise. But now there was an extra pair of footsteps moving through the house, an extra voice at the breakfast table, and an extra set of hands ready to help. Mara woke up early, even when Caleb told her she didn't have to. She said she liked the quiet of the morning and the way the sky slowly changed colors. She would meet Caleb in the kitchen, already dressed for the day, her hair tied back and a small smile on her face. Evelyn usually came in later, moving calmly and carefully, as if she didn't want to disturb whatever mood already filled the room. At first, the three of them worked together in small ways. Evelyn prepared meals and organized supplies, while Caleb and Mara handled most of the outdoor work. Mara learned quickly. She figured out how to feed the animals, how to carry water without spilling it, and how to move carefully around the horses so they wouldn't get startled. Caleb watched her with quiet respect. He had expected her to get tired or frustrated, but she kept going, even when her hands were sore and her clothes were dusty. During the long afternoons, when the sun hung high and the heat made everything feel heavy, Caleb and Mara often took short breaks under the shade of a large tree near the fence line. They would sit on the ground, leaning against the rough bark, sharing water and talking about whatever came to mind. Mara talked about her life in the city, the busy streets, the noise, and the way everything always felt rushed, bare. She said she had chased big dreams, thinking success would make her feel complete, but instead she often felt more lost than ever. Caleb listened closely, nodding now and then. He understood the feeling of working hard for something and still feeling empty. Caleb shared stories about the ranch, how he and Evelyn had built it piece by piece, how every fence post and every barn wall held a memory. He talked about the good times, the laughter, and the plans they once made for the future. He didn't talk much about what had gone wrong, but the weight of it was clear in his voice. Mara didn't interrupt. She didn't try to give advice. She just listened, and that made Caleb feel lighter, as if he didn't have to carry everything by himself for a while. In the evenings after dinner, the three of them sometimes sat in the living room. The old couch and chairs were worn but comfortable. Mara would turn on soft music or talk about a book she was reading. Evelyn would sit quietly, folding laundry or staring at the floor. Caleb noticed how different the two sisters were. Despair. Mara filled the space with words and small movements, while Evelyn seemed to shrink into the corners of the room, like she was trying not to be noticed. One night, as Mara talked about a funny moment from her job in the city, Caleb laughed without even realizing it, but the sound surprised him. It had been so long since laughter came easily. Mara smiled when she heard it, and for a moment, the room felt warm and light. Evelyn watched them from across the room. Her face stayed calm, but her hands slowed as she folded a shirt. Burnt. She looked at Caleb, then at her sister, and something in her eyes shifted. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something quieter and more complicated, like a mix of sadness and realization. The next day, Evelyn decided to spend more time outside. Breaths. She joined Caleb and Mara in the fields, bringing them water and snacks. She tried to be part of their conversations, asking questions and sharing small stories of her own. At first, it felt a little awkward, like everyone was trying too hard to act normal. But slowly, the tension eased, and the three of them found a simple rhythm again. Bay. Still, there were moments when Caleb and Mara ended up alone together. Sometimes Evelyn went back to the house early, saying she felt tired. Other times, she stayed behind in the barn, organizing tools or supplies. During those moments, Caleb and Mara talked more freely. One afternoon, as clouds gathered in the sky and the air grew cool, Mara asked Caleb a question he hadn't expected. "Do you ever wish things were different?" she said quietly. "Bear." Caleb paused, resting his hands on the fence he was fixing. He looked out at the open land, the fields stretching far into the distance.
"Every day," he admitted, "but I don't know how to change what's already happened."
Mara nodded slowly. "I know that feeling. Sometimes it feels like you're standing still while the world keeps moving." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the wind move through the grass. The moment felt heavy, but also honest. There was no pretending between them. No need to hide how they felt. That evening, a light rain began to fall. The sound of it tapping against the roof filled the house. The air smelled fresh and clean. The three of them ate dinner together, the rain creating a soft background noise to their quiet conversation. After the meal, Mara helped Evelyn wash the dishes. Caleb sat at the table watching them. He noticed how carefully Mara spoke to her sister, choosing her words gently, as if she didn't want to upset her. Evelyn smiled now and then, but her eyes often drifted away, lost in thought. Later, Mara joined Caleb on the porch again. The rain had stopped, leaving the ground damp and the sky clear. The stars peeked through the clouds, shining softly. "Thank you for letting me stay here," Mara said. "I didn't realize how much I needed a place like this." Caleb nodded. "I think we both needed the company." Mara smiled, but there was a hint of something else in her expression, something more serious. "Your sister. She's been through a lot, hasn't she?" Caleb took a deep breath. "Yeah, we both have." "Mara didn't ask for details." She seemed to understand that some things were too painful to talk about, at least not yet. Inside the house, Evelyn stood by the window, watching them. She saw the way Caleb leaned forward when he talked to Mara, the way his face softened. It reminded her of how he used to look at her long ago. The thought made her chest feel tight. That night, Evelyn had trouble sleeping. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of the house. Memories played in her mind, memories of the life she and Caleb once shared. She wondered when things had started to drift apart and if there was any way to bring them back together. The next morning, Evelyn surprised both Caleb and Mara by suggesting they all go into town together to pick up supplies. The drive was long and quiet at first, the road stretching out in front of them like a thin line through the open land. In town, they walked through the small shops and market stalls. Mara looked around with curiosity, enjoying the simple, slow pace. Evelyn pointed out places she remembered from years ago, sharing little stories about their past. Caleb listened, feeling a strange mix of nostalgia and hope. For a brief moment, it felt like they were a normal family, just spending a day together. They ate lunch at a small cafe, sitting outside and watching people pass by. Mara laughed at something Caleb said, and even Evelyn smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in a long while. But as the day went on, Caleb noticed the small signs of tension returning. The way Evelyn fell quiet when Mara and Caleb talked too long. The way Mara sometimes stopped herself from saying something, glancing at her sister first. By the time they drove back to the ranch, the sky was turning dark again. The land welcomed them back with its familiar stillness. That night, Caleb lay in bed, staring at the ceiling like he often did. But this time, his thoughts were different. He thought about Mara's questions, Evelyn's smiles in town, and the feeling of something fragile growing between all of them. He knew, deep down, that the balance in the house was shifting. Something was changing, slowly and quietly, like the land itself after a long season. Outside, the wind whispered through the fields, and the ranch settled into the night. Inside, 3 people lay awake in different rooms, each thinking about the same thing in their own way, how close they were becoming, and how dangerous that closeness might be if no one was brave enough to speak the truth. The day began like any other, with the soft light of morning spreading across the fields and the familiar sounds of the ranch waking up. Caleb stepped outside, breathing in the cool air, but he felt a strange heaviness in his chest. He couldn't explain it. It was like the calm before something unknown. Bess. Mara joined him a few minutes later, carrying a bucket of feed. She smiled, but her smile didn't reach her eyes this time. "Looks like the weather might change today," she said, glancing up at the sky. Caleb followed her gaze. Dark clouds were slowly gathering in the distance, moving across the wide blue sky like quiet shadows. "Yeah," he said. "Base, we should make sure everything's secured before it hits." They worked quickly, checking the fences, guiding the animals into safer areas, and closing up the barn doors. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain. Evelyn stayed close to the house, bringing out tools and helping where she could. There was an unspoken tension between the 3 of them, like each person could feel that something was building, not just in the sky, but between their hearts, too. By afternoon, the storm finally arrived. Rain poured down in heavy sheets, and the wind howled across the land. The power went out with a soft click, and the house fell into a dim, quiet space, lit only by the gray light from the windows. Evelyn lit a few candles and placed them around the living room. Their small flames flickered, casting soft shadows on the walls. The sound of rain on the roof was loud and steady, almost like a drumbeat. Mara sat on the couch, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. "I forgot how strong storms can be out here," she said.
Caleb nodded. "They don't mess around." Evelyn stood near the window, watching the rain.
She looked tired, more tired than usual. After a while, she turned and said quietly, "I'm going to lie down." The sound of the storm is giving me a headache. She walked down the hallway and closed her bedroom door, leaving Caleb and Mara alone in the living room. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the rain and the wind outside. "Bess," Mara shifted on the couch. "Do you ever feel like storms make everything feel more real?" she asked. Caleb thought about it. "Yeah. It's like the world gets stripped down to just what's in front of you." They sat in silence again. The candles flickered, and the shadows danced on the walls. The quiet felt heavier than before, but not uncomfortable. Just full of things that hadn't been said. After a while, Mara stood up. "I'm going to check on Evelyn," she said. She walked down the hallway and gently knocked on her sister's door. There was no answer. She knocked again, a little louder. Still nothing. She opened the door slowly and peeked inside. Evelyn was lying on the bed, facing the wall. She didn't move. "Evelyn?" Mara said softly. "I'm fine," Evelyn replied, her voice flat. "Bed. I just want to be alone." Mara hesitated. She wanted to say more, but she didn't know how. She closed the door quietly and went back to the living room.
"She says she's okay," Mara told Caleb.
"Bet." Caleb nodded, but he felt a knot form in his stomach. He knew that okay didn't always mean what it sounded like. As the storm grew stronger, a loud crash of thunder shook the house. Mara flinched and laughed nervously. "I forgot how much I hate that sound," Caleb smiled slightly. You get used to it. Or at least, you pretend you do. Mara walked over to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Fred, do you ever wish you could just leave everything behind for a while? She asked. Caleb leaned back in his chair. But this place, it's a part of me. Even when it hurts. Mara turned to look at him. There was something serious in her expression. You carry a lot, Caleb. I can see it. He didn't deny it. So do you. They stood there, facing each other in the dim light, the storm roaring outside. The moment felt fragile, like glass that could shatter with one wrong move. Another crash of thunder made the lights flicker, even though the power was already out. The candles wavered, and for a second, the room went almost completely dark. Mara took a step back, startled, and nearly lost her balance. Caleb moved without thinking, reaching out to steady her. But his hand lightly touched her arm. They both froze. The contact was small and harmless, but it felt bigger than it should have. They looked at each other, aware of how close they were standing. Bay. Mara gently pulled her arm back. Sorry, she said, even though it wasn't clear what she was apologizing for. Caleb shook his head. It's okay. They sat back down, this time on opposite ends of the couch. The space between them felt wider than before. Minutes passed. The storm continued, and the house felt like a small island in the middle of a wild world. Finally, Mara spoke. I don't want to cause problems here.
I don't want to cause problems here. Caleb frowned slightly. What do you mean? I can feel it, she said.
Things are complicated. Between you and Evelyn. And me being here doesn't make it simpler. Caleb sighed. Breaths. You didn't create what's broken. It was already there. Mara looked down at her hands. Bess. That doesn't mean I don't feel responsible. They sat in silence again, both lost in their thoughts. In her room, Evelyn lay awake, listening to the storm and the quiet voices from the living room. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she knew they were together. The thought made her chest ache. She turned over, staring at the wall, feeling like she was slowly fading from her own life. Back in the living room, the storm finally began to calm. The rain softened and the thunder moved farther away. Caleb stood up. I should check the barn, make sure everything's okay. Mara shook her head. Not in this weather, pet. It's still too dangerous. He hesitated, then sat back down. They talked about small things after that. Movies they liked, places they wanted to visit someday, silly memories from their childhoods and younger years. The lightness of the conversation helped ease the heavy feeling in the room. At one point, Mara laughed, a real, bright laugh. Caleb couldn't help but smile. It felt good to hear a sound like that in his house again. But even in the warmth of the moment, there was an understanding between them. A quiet agreement that they were standing near a line they shouldn't cross. The power finally came back with a soft hum. The lights flicked on, and the room returned to its normal shape, shadows disappearing. Mara blinked. Bet. Guess the storm's over. Caleb nodded. Looks like it. Evelyn opened her bedroom door and stepped into the hallway. She looked at the two of them in the living room, sitting together. The light revealed their faces clearly now. She didn't say anything, but her eyes spoke of questions she didn't want to ask. "I'm going to bed," she said quietly. "Good night," Mara replied. Caleb echoed the words, his voice low. Evelyn walked back into her room and closed the door. Mara stood up, desp.
I should go too. They walked down the hallway together. At her door, Mara paused.
"Thank you for today, for listening." Caleb nodded. "Anytime." She went inside and closed the door. Caleb stood there for a moment, staring at the wooden floor, feeling a mix of comfort and worry twisting inside him. He went to his own room and lay down, listening to the last drops of rain tapping against the window. The storm had passed, but he knew something else had begun. In the quiet of the night, 3 people lay awake in 3 separate rooms, each thinking about the same fragile connection, each wondering what tomorrow would bring, and each knowing deep down that things could never go back to the way they were before. The morning after the storm felt strangely quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The sky was clear and blue, and the air smelled fresh and clean. Water drops still clung to the leaves and fence posts, shining in the sunlight. Caleb stepped outside and looked across the land, but instead of feeling calm, he felt uneasy. Inside the house, Evelyn moved through the kitchen without making much noise. She brewed coffee and set 3 cups on the table, even though she usually only made 2. Mara walked in a few minutes later, her steps slow, her eyes tired, like she hadn't slept well. She offered a small smile, but it faded quickly. "Morning," Mara said softly. "Morning," Evelyn replied. Caleb joined them, and the 3 of them sat down together. The silence at the table felt heavier than usual. Even the sound of spoons stirring coffee seemed too loud. Evelyn finally broke the quiet. "We should talk," she said. Mara looked up, surprised. Caleb froze, his cup halfway to his mouth. "Talk about what?" Caleb asked, though he already had a feeling he knew. Evelyn took a deep breath. "About what's been happening in this house. About how things feel different." Mara glanced at Caleb, then back at her sister. "I don't want to cause any trouble," she said quickly. "If it feels uncomfortable, I can leave." Evelyn shook her head. "That's not what this is about. Running away won't fix anything." "Best." Caleb set his cup down. "Evelyn, if there's something you want to say, just say it." Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him, as if she was seeing him clearly for the first time in years. "I see the way you 2 talk, the way you sit together, the way the house feels when you're in the same room. It's not wrong, exactly. But it's not nothing either." Mara's face turned pale. "I never meant to—" "I know," Evelyn said gently. "I know you didn't come here with any bad intentions." She stood up from the table and walked toward the window, staring out at the fields. For a long time I thought the quiet between me and Caleb was just something we had to live with, like an old injury that never fully heals. But seeing you 2 together—" She paused, searching for the right words. "It made me realize how far apart we've grown." Caleb's chest tightened. "Evelyn, I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," she replied, "and I don't think you meant to fall into this space either. But that doesn't change what I feel." Mara stood up slowly. "If I'm the problem, I'll pack my things. Evelyn turned to face her. You're just the mirror. Mara frowned. The mirror? You show me what I've stopped being, Evelyn said. Open. Warm. Willing to talk about what hurts instead of hiding from it. Caleb looked down at the table. He felt like he was standing in the middle of something fragile, unsure of where to step. Evelyn walked back and sat down. Her voice was calm, but there was a tremble under it. We lost something years ago, Caleb. Bay. We both did. And instead of reaching for each other, we pulled away. I thought keeping my distance would make the pain smaller, but it just made the space between us bigger. Caleb swallowed. I didn't know how to help you. I didn't know how to fix what was broken. Evelyn nodded. I didn't either. Mara looked at both of them, her eyes filled with worry. I never wanted to stand between you. You didn't, Evelyn said. What stood between us was already there. The room fell quiet again. The only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Finally, Evelyn spoke. Bess, I think we need to be honest with ourselves about what we feel, about what we want, and about what we can't give anymore. Bance. Caleb felt a lump in his throat. What are you saying? I'm saying that I don't know if I can be the person you need me to be, Evelyn replied. Psst. Not right now. Maybe not ever. Mara took a step back, as if the weight of the moment was too much. Psst. I shouldn't be here for this, she whispered. Evelyn looked at her. Best. You should, because you're part of this now, whether any of us planned it or not. Mara nodded slowly and stayed. That day, the ranch felt different. The land was the same. The animals moved as they always did. But inside the house, everything felt exposed. Like all the walls that had been built over the years had suddenly come down. Caleb went outside to work, but his hands moved without his mind being fully there. He kept replaying Evelyn's words in his head. I don't know if I can be the person you need. Mara joined him later, carrying a basket of tools. She walked beside him in silence for a while. I'm sorry, she said finally. Caleb shook his head. You don't have anything to be sorry for. But I do, she replied. I came here to find my own way, and I ended up stepping into something that was already hurting. Caleb leaned against the fence. You didn't cause the pain. You just made it visible. Rasp. Mara looked at him. What are you going to do? He sighed. I don't know. For so long I thought staying meant being loyal. But now I'm not sure if staying is the same as helping. They stood there, watching the animals move slowly across the field. Inside the house, Evelyn sat alone at the table, staring at a photo frame. It held an old picture of her and Caleb from years ago. Bay. They were younger, smiling, standing in front of the barn with their arms around each other. She touched the glass with her fingers, her eyes filling with tears. She didn't bother to wipe away. That evening, the three of them sat down for dinner again. The food was warm, but the mood was quiet. There was no easy conversation, no laughter. Just three people sharing a space filled with thoughts they didn't know how to speak. After the meal, Evelyn stood up. I'm going for a walk, she said. Caleb looked up. In the dark, I need air. Mara stood. "I'll go with you." Evelyn hesitated, then nodded. They walked together down the dirt path, the sky above them full of stars. The night was calm, and the land stretched out quietly around them. "I don't hate you, Evelyn," said suddenly. Mara stopped walking. "I never thought you did."
But I was afraid I might, Evelyn continued. That would have been easier.
Anger is simpler than sadness. Mara looked at her. "I don't want to take anything from you." Evelyn smiled sadly. "You can't take what I already lost." They walked back in silence. When they returned, Caleb was sitting on the porch, staring at the ground. He looked up when he saw them. Evelyn took a deep breath. "I think I need some time away. Not just from this house, from this life. I need to figure out who I am without all this quiet sitting on my chest."
Caleb stood up slowly.
"Are you saying you're leaving?" "I'm saying I need space," she replied. "Not forever, but despair. But long enough to breathe." Mara felt her heart sink. "This is my fault," she said. "Precipice." Evelyn shook her head. "No. This is our story, not yours." Caleb felt a mix of fear and relief. He didn't want to admit to himself. "When?" "Soon," Evelyn said.
A few days. That night, the house felt emptier than ever, even though all three of them were still there. Caleb lay in bed, staring at the ceiling.
He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know if this was the beginning of an ending or the end of a long beginning. In her room, Evelyn packed a small bag, folding clothes carefully, as if trying to bring order to the mess inside her heart. And in the guest room, Mara sat on the edge of the bed, wondering how she had come to a place where every step forward felt like it might hurt someone she cared about. Outside, the ranch rested under the quiet sky, unaware of the changes happening within its walls. The wind moved gently through the fields, carrying away the last warmth of the day, leaving behind a cool night filled with uncertainty, honesty, and the fragile hope that sometimes, facing the truth, is the only way to find a new path forward. The days that followed felt slow and careful, like everyone was walking on a narrow path, afraid of taking a wrong step. Evelyn moved quietly through the house, finishing small tasks, folding clothes, and writing lists of things Caleb might need while she was gone. She didn't cry much. Instead, she stayed calm in a way that felt deeper than tears. Caleb tried to help her, but he often found himself standing in doorways, unsure of what to say. Every word felt too small for what was happening between them. Sometimes he wanted to ask her to stay. Other times he felt like letting her go was the kindest thing he could do. Mara kept to herself more than before. She helped with chores and meals, but she spoke less, as if she didn't want to take up space anymore. The house, which had once felt lighter when she arrived, now carried a different kind of quiet. It wasn't empty. It was full of goodbyes that hadn't been spoken yet. On the morning Evelyn planned to leave, the sky was pale and soft, like it didn't want to make a big show of the moment. Caleb loaded her small bag into the back of the car. He moved slowly, feeling the weight of each step. Evelyn stood by the porch, looking around the ranch. Her eyes traveled over the fields, the barn, the old fence posts, and the long road that led away. This place held so many memories, both good and painful. Mara stood a few steps behind her, unsure if she should come closer. Brash. Evelyn turned to her sister. "You take care of yourself," she said gently. "Beth." Mara nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "You too." Then Evelyn looked at Caleb. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other. No anger, no blame. Just years of shared life sitting between them.
I hope you find some peace here, Evelyn said.
Caleb swallowed. I hope you find it wherever you're going. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. The understanding between them was quiet and complete. Evelyn got into the car, started the engine, and slowly drove down the long dirt road. Caleb and Mara watched until the car became a small shape in the distance, and then disappeared completely. For a long time, neither of them moved. The ranch felt bigger after she left. Breath. The rooms felt wider. The air felt different. Mara finally spoke. I should probably go too. Caleb turned to her. You don't have to rush.
I think I do, she said softly. You both need space.
And I need to find my own way like I came here to do. They sat on the porch together for a while, just listening to the wind move through the grass. I'm glad I met you, Mara said. Caleb nodded. Bay. I'm glad you came. You reminded me what it feels like to talk again. To feel again. She smiled, but her eyes were sad. Sometimes that's the hardest gift to give. Later that day, Mara packed her things. Caleb helped carry her bag to the car. Where will you go? He asked. I don't know yet, she replied. Or somewhere new, somewhere I can start fresh. They stood there, the sun warm on their backs.
Take care of the ranch, Maris said with a small smile. I will, Caleb said.
Take care of yourself. She got into the car and drove away, just like her sister had earlier. Caleb watched until she was gone. For the first time in a long while, he was truly alone. The nights after that were the hardest. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been before. No extra footsteps. Bay. No voices in the living room. Just the sound of the wind and the soft creaks of an old building settling into itself. Caleb still sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sky change colors. But now, instead of feeling stuck in the past, he felt like he was standing at the edge of something new. He started doing small things differently. He fixed a broken chair instead of leaving it in the corner. He painted the old fence instead of just patching it. He planted a small garden near the house, even though he had never cared much for gardening before. The ranch slowly began to look brighter, more alive. And in a way, so did Caleb. He began to talk more when he went into town. He stayed longer at the cafe, chatting with the owner and the people who passed through. He didn't rush back to the ranch like he used to. He allowed himself to be part of the world again. Sometimes he thought about Evelyn. He hoped she was finding what she needed. He thought about Mara too, wondering where she had gone and what she was building for herself. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was from Evelyn. She wrote about the place she was staying, a small town near the water. She said the air smelled like salt, and the mornings were quiet in a different way than the ranch. Bend. She wrote that she was learning how to be by herself, how to sit with her thoughts instead of running from them. At the end of the letter, she wrote, I don't know what the future holds for us. But I'm grateful for what we shared. I hope you're finding your own way forward, too. But Caleb folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. A few weeks later, another letter came. This one was from Mara. She wrote about a new job she had found in a small town, working at a community center. She said she felt useful again, like she was part of something that mattered. She thanked Caleb for showing her that it was okay to slow down and listen to her own heart. Caleb smiled as he read her words. Life on the ranch continued. The seasons changed. The fields turned golden, then brown, then green again. Bane. Caleb kept working, but he also kept growing. One evening, as he sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the hills, he realized something important. Being alone didn't feel the same as being lonely anymore. He had learned that loneliness wasn't just about not having people around. It was about not being honest with yourself, about not facing what hurts, about staying still when life asks you to move. Now, he felt open, but not healed completely, not finished, but open. But it was a peaceful quiet now, not a heavy one. Caleb stood up, took a deep breath of the cool evening air, and walked back inside. Tomorrow, he would wake up early again. He would tend to the animals, fix what needed fixing, and keep building a life that felt real to him. He didn't know if Evelyn would ever come back. He didn't know if he would ever see Mara again. But he knew this. He was no longer just surviving his days. He was living them. Outside, the stars filled the sky, bright and steady. The ranch rested under their light, and Caleb rested within himself, finally ready for whatever the future chose to bring.